that book has been out of print for quite a few decades. I wrote that when I was recruiting on the tennis circuit between watching matches, and it's not very creative, but if you find it at all, it's under the pen name Xavier Einstein. Okay. So someone I went to college with, I went to Rutgers out in New Jersey, and this fellow became the head acquisitions editor for a small publishing company in New York City. And do people still play Trivial Pursuit? Do people know what Trivial Pursuit is? So the publishing company came into being in order to take advantage of the interest in that. So if you were really passionate about that game, you went through those 6,000 questions pretty quickly. And then you just kept recycling them, and everyone became smarter. Boston accent smarter, the longer that you did this. So someone thought, oh, let's come up with 6 topics and write 1,000 questions for each of them, and it'll be a fun book, but it also could substitute for the questions for Trivial Pursuit. So the person who did the first book evidently didn't do a very good job. It was factual, but it wasn't fun. So my friend knew that I could probably make it fun. We having taken some film classes together and running a film organization at the college I was at. But he said, as a way of having people think that it's just one brilliant person writing all of these books, everybody wrote under the name Xavier Einstein. So, but then he gave me this clue, and I said, well, geez, I want my mother to know that I actually wrote a book. I need my name in it. So what I did is, if you ever find this out of print, it's movies, Trivia Mania, Movies Volume 2, and the second page says in the dedication, this book would not have been possible without the work of Howard Singer. Fact, right? And I'm very impressed because I think, well, I know I look a lot younger than I actually am. I think I might well be the oldest person in this room. But that people, and I knew that J.W. would know Groucho Marx, but that people recognized who the Marx brothers are and Groucho Marx, there's hope for this city. And so there's kind of when people recognize the insanity, the healthy insanity of the Marx Brothers. It keeps our community. So, any of you ever heard of the Marx Brothers? So, go to YouTube, see some of their bits. It's probably the most literate intellectual humor in a sort of destructive manner that you will ever see. And people who used to write the movies, actually a couple of them won Pulitzer Prizes in the 30s. So it's just really highbrow, making lowbrow out of highbrow situations. Well, I've been at Boston College this is my 36th year, and I'm passionate about what you all are doing. And I'm very excited. I'm a connector as well. And when I met Josephine, and I got one of these packages unsolicited in the mail, and it's like I thought, did I win Publishers Clearinghouse? What is this big thing? And I responded. Did you mention at some point, like you sent a lot of these out to a lot of different colleges?
No, we actually targeted the schools where our kids were interested.
So there was a method to the madness.
But the three of us spent several hours putting these together. And the one thing I didn't say when I introduced Howard is after we sent the folder, I'm on the way to Raleigh on a soccer tournament with Mindy McBride, couldn't be here as well. She's a teacher at this school. She thought I had the great idea that it would be fun to put 12 10-year-olds in a van together. So I get the call and I answer, and it's, hello, this is Mr. Singer from Boston College, and I'm like, he's like, I'm like, hello? And he's like, is this a bad time? I'm like, no, this is perfectly great, Mindy. And Mindy's looking at me going, wow. And I'm like, and so she goes, okay, right, be quiet. And so we had this conversation, and we got off the phone, and she goes, please tell me that was the dean of admissions at Boston College. And I said, it was, and I don't think he was going to call me back if I had hung up on him. So that's how that happened. That's how we're here today. But anyway.
And I'm old school enough so that I didn't do the email or anything like that. No, I pick up the phone and I like to speak to people. When I have to do something on campus, people will text the person 2 offices away from each other. I like walking into an office and meeting someone I haven't met, and that's how you solve problems, and that's how you gain great friends. But I come from a background where I was the first in my family to ever go to college. so I was sort of, the hopes were on me to go to college. And I had no idea what the heck I was doing. You know, I chose Rutgers. You want to know how things have changed? Because I thought I had the coolest mascot of any school I'd ever been to. Anyone here from New Jersey? You know what the...
Sure.
Anyone else know the mascot for Rutgers?
Scarlet Knights.
The Scarlet Knights. Yeah, I thought a knight on horseback was so cool. I hadn't seen USC. I wanted to go west. I hadn't seen them first. But then I went there, and I didn't know what I was doing. My parents dropped me off. They kind of kicked me out of the car. They went back and did a U-turn on New Jersey. We call them rotaries in Boston. They're called jug handles. There, you switch around, you go back up the turnpike, you go north. And I was my luggage, and I didn't know what I was doing. You know, advisement systems didn't work. There was no such thing. There were these orientations in those days. I didn't even know people knew about the phrases retention rate, let alone graduation rate. And I figured it out on my own. And then I go to Boston College, and I was a teaching tennis professional for about 5 years. And then I had a chance to coach in college, and I thought this would be great, you know, to be involved in a college, to have high-level national talent, which I wasn't coaching at the club level. And then I just discovered education. And then I moved into admission, and I thought, this is a chance to try to educate, in addition to pay off a mortgage, it was a chance to, because, you know, trust me, the women's tennis coach at University of Alabama doesn't make what Mr. Saban makes coaching football. You really have to do something additional to that. But this was a chance to almost pay it forward and to let people know. So I do most of my work is done in New York and New Jersey, and I spend most of my time in the Bronx, in Harlem, in Newark, in areas like that. And it's funny, I go into those communities, you know, and I say to the students, you know, who's the minority now? And so I let them know that it doesn't matter about the color, it doesn't matter that, you know, I'm representing a Jesuit Catholic school, and I'm a Jewish guy. What matters is that you have to know how to get what you want and to do it in the right way. In Boston, and I'm going to spend less of my time in the next 25 minutes or so talking directly about Boston College, but mostly talking more about the process and what you need to know, and Josephine gave me some topics that I think would be interesting for all of you to know. And then I want to give you plenty of opportunity to students as well as all of you to ask me questions. But you represent what I was a long time ago, but I didn't have the benefit of someplace like, you know, what JW does, or what College Choice Foundation does for you. A lot of programs I work with throughout the Northeast, they're CBOs. If you don't know it, this is a CBO, a community-based organization. You know, they get sometimes they get funding from the federal government, sometimes it's all privately, you know, done writing grants. But you're all representing CBOs. And before you leave, and I just learned to say this years and years ago, you have a benefit that so many of your peers do not. You have additional people looking out for you. And you're going to have help. If you go to a great school, it's not like you're lacking for good college support. You know, counselors, they think I'm going to be in Homewood. I think it might be Wednesday. And I'm visiting among the 18 or so schools in this area that I'll be visiting before I go home Thursday night. Be sure you say thank you to the people who helped to get you the opportunities, because all too often students caught up in the exhalation of going to college, maybe being the first one in the family to go to college, or maybe being the first one to go away to college. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I think JW already did a terrific job, not necessarily going to Boston College, but what might be the benefits for going far away, the benefits to you, and then the benefits, as you can see, by coming back to a community and bringing what you have learned, bringing perspectives and bringing ideas that you could not have had if you, talk to Sean, if you got out of the comfort zone. You know. But you have to be the type of person that is comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's kind of twist, isn't it? because there are a lot that aren't. When I talk to students of color, who are referred to as AHANA students at Boston College, that's the acronym that stands for African American, Hispanic, Asian, and Native American. There are about 40 different universities and colleges that actually use that acronym. They have to get permission from Boston College to use it. We don't make any money off of it, unfortunately. We didn't copyright it, but it's understood that, or if you go to Smith College, Women's School in Massachusetts, it's Alana, it's Latina, so they use the L instead of the H word. But you have to have a sense of what you're looking for, without knowing that you're always you're going to get something that you may not have looked for. And there's a book that came out, I guess, Colleges That Change Lives. And there's a bunch of different colleges in there, but whether or not the school's in there, you want to go to a college that's going to change your life. And Jay, I'm so proud to see JW. I used to come down to Birmingham when there was no interest in anyone applying to Boston College because I could see my man, I could see JW. I could get on there, and I could justify it because I'm talking about Boston College, but and eventually, I kind of twisted his arm to do some work for us, and then I can't think of a better ambassador for Boston College, and for what, JW tells the truth. He came with resources that you don't have. And I agree with that 100%. He would have done really well had he gone lots of different places, but I don't think he would have been the same person. So let me first, because I give them all my receipts when I get back to Boston, and they pay me money back. So I have to talk a little bit more specific about Boston College. But then I'm going to talk about the affordability. Is private education worth it? Is going away worth it? How much debt is too much debt to take on? Just to try to give you all, and everyone here, because you're all going to be representative of other students at some point, how it may be worthwhile. It may not be, but it may. To give you a quick down and dirty about Boston College, when I do presentations, I like to talk about the three things that would distinguish any college from all of the others. You have over 3,000 choices in this country. You're not sort of pigeonholed into something. Like I started getting applications from mainland China 2 years ago, and everything is about taking tests in China. It's called sort of a final examination called the Gaokao. Students spend an entire year, sometimes 2 years, doing nothing but studying for that test. You think the SAT is meaningful? I mean, that thing makes what you guys are doing tic-tac-toe. And you just put the X in the middle and you figure it out. This thing, there's so much pressure. If they don't get in the 90th or the 95th percentile of everyone that takes the test, students from China, it's like what medical schools do. They don't match with the top schools. And I've read essays about somebody who has to go to school in America. Can you imagine that? Because they didn't get into one of the top schools. They wanted to go into medical school, but they didn't place high enough in math and science. So they have to come and maybe go to an MIT or a Caltech or someplace like that in the States. And then they find out liberal arts. What is this stuff? Liberal arts. It's more than math and science. So going and looking for something different, getting out of your comfort zone, recognizing that there are opportunities. BC is one of the schools that can do that for you. And our business cards say, Associate Director of Admission. More factually, it should say rejection. When you look at schools that are among the most highly selective in the country, it's a supply-demand. It's very much an economic model. There are more students who are qualified than you can admit. So you just can't admit all the people. So you end up saying no to people that can do the work and will be terrific there. But something about them maybe wasn't quite as attractive to you as the others. So to make yourself, and I've sort of morphed into giving you the advice first and talking about BC, less specific, but I want to be cognizant of time here as well and give you all chances to ask me questions. There's one of you is a junior, and that's great because you can keep from making the mistakes that maybe these guys have done. Or if they don't do their jobs well, then maybe no one made mistakes. But a common mistake is to take it easy senior year. To think that, any of you answer this question. What have you heard is the single most important year of high school that college admission directors consider?
Junior year.
Junior year, sure. And I tell people that's exactly true until the first day of senior year. When I recruited tennis players, my niche was to find people whose best tennis was ahead of them and not behind them. Recruiting students at any selective school, not just my school, is about the same. Your senior year, if you continue to challenge yourself with the best courses you can take, and then make a statement that you're going to do better than you ever have in any other year, you send a message to colleges that say, your best academic work is ahead of you. And, and maybe you didn't start out great, but if you're doing this instead of that, colleges are going to take notice and they're going to want to invest in you. So, you may have no interest in going to medical school, and you have a chance to be in an AP bio or a chemistry class. And then you say, I don't want to take that, it's too hard. It's a mistake. If you and your teachers and your counselors and your family think that you can handle really good courses, you should dig in those courses. And you should do as well as possible. Oftentimes, the tiebreaker when your Boston College acceptance rate in recent years has hovered around 30%. Some years it's 28%, last year it was 32%. So essentially, I'm a humanities guy. I wrote a book around this. I don't know much about math and science. So I'll have 10 applications on my desk. Generally, I can admit 3 of them. How else, the kind of courses you've taken as a senior, how challenging are they? Are they representative of each of the 5 major academic subject areas? And presuming that you haven't taken, you're not applying early action or at school's early decision. You're going on the basis of everything you've done in grades 9, 10, and 11. If you're applying regular admission like most students do in America, what your first quarter or your first semester grades are is almost a tiebreaker. It helps to distinguish you from other people who are going to look like you relative to their extracurriculars and their test scores, but if you keep challenging yourself and you have really good grades as a senior, then you're going to get opportunities to go to some colleges that your peer group, looking very similar to you, wouldn't, because maybe they didn't want to apply to a business school, so they didn't take calculus. If okay, Sean didn't get out of calculus.
Did he take AP Cal senior year?
I believe, yes, he did. He did, but I'll tell all of you who are taking calculus that the College Board represents this as, oh, you're really ready for college level coursework. At really good colleges, you cover in 2 months what you did in the whole year. It moves so much faster. And so if you want to go to a business program, you better take calculus. But you just have to know that you're going to work. It's not like you're going to cruise through it when you get to college. In a lot of places, it's not that way. But the poor guy, some of the other runners, some of the other classmen said, oh, whoever he's got, oh, you don't want to take that person. He's really hard. You want to take this person. They go a lot slower. And he didn't know that going into orientation. So, and I guess that too many other people must have known that because that class closed. He couldn't get out. So he's gonna learn whether he wants to or not about that. So that's one thing that you can think about to distinguish yourself. Like I said, I'm gonna go backwards. Why go away? There's great schools down here. They're cheaper. Cost of living is cheaper. Why better jobs? And she said, Howard, tell me things that I could tell him to just shut up. And I said, you remember I'm a Rutgers grad, right? And I said, but I'm going to tell you what I think is the truth. If you go to a school that is a great school in its region, whether it's a state school or a private school, you're going to have really good opportunities in that area. If you go to a school that has a national and an international student base, which translates into a national and an international alumni network, you're going to find jobs. You're going to get into graduate programs all over the country and all over the world because it's a known commodity. So, and as someone, well, I was a Boston kid who went to Rutgers, which is an anomaly because Rutgers is a state school. So if her boyfriend flashes that resume in that class ring throughout the tri-state area, Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey, there's going to be countless opportunities. But what if the job that he really wants is in the Twin Cities, or is in Atlanta, or in Los Angeles, or in Detroit, or in San Antonio? All places that a Boston College, a Duke, a Notre Dame, a Penn, a UPenn, schools that have these national alumni organizations, they set things up for you. It just makes it's a big difference. Is it going to be more difficult? I didn't come to Alabama for several years, but I would regularly go my first year and recruit, and I still go to New Orleans every year. New Orleans is, it's a little more cosmopolitan than any city in Alabama. It's got a strong Catholic base, so there's a natural affinity for people who might want to send their children to a Catholic school. It has a Jesuit school, and we're a Jesuit school, so there's those kinds of things. I learned quickly about how to effectively weed out people, students, and how to be a pretty good recruiter. So I started answering the questions that came all the time. So, I'll answer some for you. Yes, it's cold. You can't have a car on most of our campuses, which is a big Southern thing, a lot of times. And I started learning early on that a lot of times families will say, if you don't go to Boston College or fill in the Northeastern school and you stay home, we'll get you a new car. That's incentivizing them. In some circles it's called bribery. And then the other thing that's important is, if it's specific to Boston College, there is no Greek life. So there are certain things that are endemic and really important to some family tradition, and you may not find those at a lot of Northeastern schools. And some of them do have Greek life. But looking at New England, so many schools up there are so good for you. But it's as if, in my experience, the Mason-Dixon line is like the Great Wall of China. And sometimes people from down south will go up and they'll peer over it and they'll look and they say, no, not for me, not for me. I remember one of the first times I spoke to a student who was really interested in going away to school. The person, I think, might have been from Baton Rouge. And I said, so are you looking at other northern schools? And they said, yes. And I said, oh, great. What other northern schools do you consider? And she said, Vanderbilt, Chapel Hill, and Georgetown. I said, Georgetown? He said, well, if you read your history, Georgetown's a southern city. I mean, it was the compromise about making it the capital because there's so many people were from that area. So consider going away, considering pushing yourself, consider what you're going to gain, consider who your roommates are going to be. They're going to be people who are different. Now, if you're not that type of person, it's okay, don't do it. The beauty of this country is there are so many opportunities and so many options for you, to stay home. And maybe there's family reasons that you should be staying home. And maybe there's financial reasons that you should stay home. Because maybe there's 3 other siblings behind you, and there has to be money for everybody to go to college. So there's a nice segue to going into cost. About 4 years ago, I did the junior and senior parent talk at Jesuit High School in New Orleans. And one of the things they wanted me to talk about is similar to what Josephine had mentioned. The cost. cost, my God, BC's going to cost about just under $70,000 tuition, room, board, and fees. Almost every private college is going to be that way. You have to think that, if we're all honest, we go up a little more than the cost of living every year. And then, schools, if they build a new dormitory, someone's paying for that. So room and board goes up, usually even more than the cost of living for tuition. So a 4-year private college in the Northeast is going to be well over $250,000. And that scares the heck out of a lot of families. You know what a lot of families don't know is? They think they're saving money when you go to a state school. You know what the graduation rate for state schools is? It's so much lower than it is for private schools. And oftentimes, the number of years that it takes to graduate. I mean, not every school is like this, but do your homework. An average student may spend 5 to 6 years at a state institution before they graduate. So if you're taking longer to graduate than 4 years, a family isn't saving the money that you think you are. And what's behind those numbers? It says typically that the courses are not offered with the availability that they need to be offered for their students to get out in 4 years. If you do a 5th year, you're an athlete, or you go into if you want to be a CPA, there's a required 5th year program for that. But for the most part, I think you should be considering places where you know you're going to get out 4 years. So private colleges have so much more money than state schools. The endowments are so big. So a lot of the students that I recruit in New York and New Jersey, they're shocked when they do what they need to do with the financial aid forms, and we talk, Sean is a good example of this. Everything comes in and all the paperwork is done. For many families, it's cheaper. Out-of-pocket expenses is less for a family to go to a school that costs $70,000 than to go to one that may cost $25,000. So if you never even thought about that, put that back in Sarah Gubble there. That it's something that indeed is much more affordable. So, and the other thing is, how much debt should you take on? The first rule of financial aid, and I'm not a financial aid officer, but I've been doing this long enough and helping families that have actually given some talks about this. I did one in Newark this summer. The first rule of financial aid is, insofar as a family can contribute to the education of their children, it's their responsibility. Once they, and then it's argumentative about what the formula says that your family can pay and what you think you actually can pay. So, and that's where we come in and sort of intercede on behalf of families. But you don't want to spend too much of your money, but everybody should contribute something. And that's where loans come in. And lots of studies have been done. Students who have a loan, and a lot of families are really loan adverse, but people who have loans, those students tend to do better academically than students who don't have loans at many, many colleges. Does any of you 5 figure out why?
Because they take it for granted.
Yeah, they're paying for it.
Yeah.
Take ownership of your education. It means I remember I worked 2 summers and saved money to get my first car. That's an automobile, to all of you. And it was a 1964 Rambler Ambassador. It cost $300, and it was beat up. It was this terrible car. I treated it like it was a solid gold Cadillac because my old man didn't give me any money for it. I saved $300 to buy this thing. It was mine. And education is the same thing. Education, you can think of it as a commodity. You're paying a lot of money. It's after a mortgage and maybe an automobile. But it absolutely should be an automobile. But after a mortgage, the single biggest thing you're ever going to purchase. So it's something that a bank can never take away from you. You're not going to default on that. So you want to go to the place that is going to be best for you, the best fit. We had a convocation speaker. It's someone I worked with for many years. He wrote a book called No Chance in the World. the author. It's a book that a lot of college freshman classes are reading now by Steve Pemberton. All the freshmen have to read this book, and it's about someone who grew up in the foster school system who was abused every day of his life by a foster family, and somehow came out of it. And he is today Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer for Walgreens nationally. I don't know if he does much for Walgreens, but he goes around telling the story. He wrote this book. It's just signed a deal to make it into a movie. And he said something in a luncheon that I went to this past week before he spoke. And he was talking to a select group of faculty and said, families, parents in particular, are always so concerned about the cost of an education, which they should be, and are my kids going to get a job? They're paying all this money, and they want them to be successful. And he said the way he sees it, and he chose, accepting that it's Boston College, a liberal arts, northeastern, expensive school. He got a lot of funding, but he said he learned that he wants his children to be fulfilled, which is more important than being successful. If you're fulfilled, look at this woman here. Look at this gentleman here. There's different ways, you can measure success differently, but when you're fulfilled at the end of the day, think of the people who are teachers. In a country that still doesn't value that. How can teachers have a starting salary of $35,000 a year? And then there are people who run Fortune 500 companies. They lose hundreds of millions of dollars, and yet those people get $40 million bonuses. For what? But you want to be fulfilled, and you have to figure out what it is that you can do. But I think it's okay to pay something for your education. It's okay to take a loan, provided that you're not crazy about it. To be $100,000 in debt because you take a private loan, you're never going to dig out of that. No, I don't care. If you get into your first 3 schools and you have to take a lot of money because you wanted to go there, it's a mistake. What's an acceptable amount of loans? I'd say anywhere. For 4 years when you come out, if you ain't owe anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000 or $30,000, that I think it's easy for me to say. It's not my money, right? But I think that is something that is eminently doable because those loans, it's you get a job, you start paying it back. It's like your first time of learning about how to budget things, and after a certain number of years, you've paid it all off. The way I explain to lots of families, I explain this mostly to parents instead of students. If I said to you, I'm going to give you a home. Let's say the home costs $250,000. So it's a pretty good neighborhood, right? And you could live in it virtually free for 4 years. You haven't paid anything. And then 3 to 6 months after that, you're going to pay, let's say, $250 to $350 a month for maybe the next 6 or 7 or 8 years. And at the end of that, so you now have been in that house for 12 to 14 years. At the end of it, you have paid $30,000. You own a $250,000 house. And likely it's even more than that because of cost of living and inflation. Does that sound like a bad deal? It isn't. I think that's the way a lot of families should be thinking about things. But if you owe $80,000, I think you got to screw loose. I don't care if you got into an Ivy League school or any place else. That is not worth it because, and then you want to go to graduate school. So an acceptable amount of debt, every family has to determine that on their own. But on average, when you look at all the schools that give a lot of financial aid to students and expect them to pay something, at my school, the average debt after 4 years is about $23,000 to $25,000. Yes?
Just a quick question for these guys, because I don't know the answer. Does it matter if it's a federal subsidized loan or if it's a non-federally subsidized loan? Would you make a distinction? Because the interests are different.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, well, the people who get federally subsidized loan, yeah, the big advantage of that is the interest is not accruing while someone is still in school, so it's conceivably for 4 years, and the interest rate is much lower. So if it's an unsubsidized loan, then that's almost like going to a bank and you pay a high
Right,
rate.
that's what I'm saying. Are you talking about 30,000 of a
Oh,
subsidized? I know what they are, I'm
Oh,
just saying.
I'm sorry, I thought you
and I'm
wanted
like,
to-
yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't think you were there.
No, it's, well, that's inclusive of all of those.
Okay.
Most people who come to a private school are, for the most part, are getting unsubsidized loan. But there was actually a family 2 years ago from New Jersey that their kid wanted nothing more than to go to Boston College. Their daughter, and she was really, really smart. She was admitted, and they got caught up in this. They sort of lost their home about 3 years ago. The dad was out of work, and so he went back to work. I think they were in debt from the 2008 crisis, and so he went back to work. But he had been making like $250,000. Now he's making $85,000, but he didn't lose the home, but the home was, I don't know if it's a receivership, but it looked like they had so much more money than they actually did. So the college, BC, and the other schools were saying that you can afford to pay $50,000 a year, so we're just giving you $15,000 in financial aid. And he said that's not the case. And he said, but our daughter wants so much to go to Boston College, we're going to take out an unsubsidized loan. And I said I wouldn't do that if I were you, because you're looking at taking out $40,000 a year times 4, $120,000. Didn't hear from $160,000. Told you I was in Bush major. So I hear from the family 5 or 6 months later. They come up and they thank me for admitting their daughter to Boston College. I said, I didn't know you were here. I said, oh yeah, we determined we were going to make her dream come true, and this was her dream. She was, I hope it's not a nightmare, because that's too much money. That would be factored in, because that's part of the loan. I mean, that's part of our collective debt. I think I hit on most of the points. We talked about being first generation, we talked about the cost, we talked about the loans. Boston College, 3 things that make it different, and this is where Father Leahy will sign my check this month now. We're medium-sized, we have about 9,100 undergraduates, so there aren't too many places that are comfortably in that sort of 7,000 to 12,000 range. We are not in the city, which so many people think we're called Boston College. We're 5 miles west of the city. We're in a beautiful suburb of the city of Newton, which year in and year out is ranked as one of the 3 safest cities in the country. But we're so proximate to this great metropolitan area, the city of Boston. We've got public transportation access, maybe in the Q&A session, if some of you want to, ask. I know that Sean learned to maneuver the T for a bit. But that's what we call the transit system. You can find out from JW how often he may have gone into the city and what's good about that. But we're a hybrid school. If you remember one word about Boston College, we're hybrid. We're not huge like a state school or a land-grant institution. We're not tiny like these small liberal arts schools. We're medium-sized. We're not urban. There are great urban schools in this country. The NYU and Columbia and, I choke to say, but Boston University. They're arch rivals. BCBU is like Auburn, Alabama. Okay, so to put it in perspective that you'll understand. The Harvards, Chicago's, UPenns, right in the middle of a city. And some of you might really want to be in the middle of a city, and that could be great for you. And some of you might want nothing to do with the city. So you look at the schools that maybe in the New England area, they would call them NESCAC schools, the New England Small College Association. Places like Williams and Amherst, Middlebury, and Bates and Bowdoin. They're spectacular. Your entire life revolves around the college, so there really isn't any city to speak of. And then you have a place like a BC, and there's maybe a handful of other schools that are suburban. You have all the benefits of internships, jobs, culture, museums, sports, intermingling with the other 250,000 college-age students that go to one of the 50 schools, Brandeis included, that are in the metropolitan Boston area. It's always been the preeminent college capital of this country. So it makes BC a little bit unique. And then the last thing, and I'm not sure that JW said we're a Catholic school, but a Jesuit school. And it's something unique. There's Mobile has a Jesuit, Spring Hill is a maybe the smallest Jesuit of the 28 schools in America. Cristo Rey schools run by the Jesuits, and Holy Family is one here in Birmingham. It's really unique. It's unique, but you have to find out if it's for you. You know, we don't require that you have to be a particular faith. Boston College might be one of the few religiously affiliated institutions that has an atheist society. That tells you about the religious freedom. And what Father Leahy says all the time is a university is about the free exchange of ideas. And if you don't understand different perspectives, how are you educated well enough to come up with a really, a strong set of beliefs? Why do you vote Democrat? Well, because Mom and Dad told you to vote Democrat. Not good enough. It isn't. At BC, we have a core curriculum. Everybody takes a series of 15 liberal arts courses, which are becoming increasingly more interdisciplinary. And instead of taking a course in science and a course in sociology, you can take a team talk course that studies the political impact of science. So, why, you study climatology, and then you figure out, oh, wait a second, why are all these noxious gas-spewing corporations seemingly located in low-income areas? And why don't you have them in the real nice areas? You don't have political clout if you live in those areas. This young man that I recruited out of the Bronx, brilliant young man, and he didn't even realize this. He said, I've got 3 of these plants within like 5 or 6 blocks. He said, I never stopped to think that there are places in this country that don't have, trash burning plants. And so this is a way of understanding the world around you. And I think that makes BC not any better than any other school that anyone's going to look at, but a little bit different, because we really encourage you to help to figure out problems of the future. We want people to do what this young man is doing. Increasingly less young. Still a man. He was young when he so that's the BC. That's the BC thing. So I promise
Howard, will you say something about the difference Boston colleges with financial aid giving scholarships versus meeting need?
Okay, so BC, but let's represent maybe the 30 to 40 most selective colleges in America. Most of us give almost no merit scholarships. And you should all look at schools that give you merit scholarships, because it may be in your best interest to go someplace where it doesn't cost you anything. It may be in your best interest to go someplace where you have a loan, because that's the place you determine is the fit for you. But the difference between need-based and merit-based, colleges like a Boston College, almost all of their money is almost exclusively need-based, because that's one way that private institutions leverage their endowed funds so that families who couldn't afford to write a check for $65,000 to $70,000 a year are still able to send their children to a place like BC. Otherwise, and I tell families this honestly, we would be exclusively, rich white folks. And that's not what an education should be about. An education should be about everybody, being inclusive. We don't do those. But if you want financial aid, the tough part of it is you have to apply for it. It doesn't just happen. And that's not fun. Your folks have to, you have to fill out tax returns. You have to fill out the FAFSA and the CSS profile. And the CSS profile is a federal form that most state schools don't require, but private ones do. And they come up with their own formulas for figuring out how much you're going to get. And it's going to change from school to school, which is one of the reasons that if you are first generation, it's oftentimes a disadvantage for you to apply early someplace, because a lot of times you're locking in, you're ethically obligated to attend a school that admits you early, particularly binding early decision, without always knowing in advance if they've made it affordable for you. A place like BC, we just finished a capital campaign, and I think we just passed a $2 billion endowment. $2 billion sounds like a lot of money, doesn't it? It's chump change compared to Harvard's 45 billion, most of the Ivies anywhere from 4 to 16 or 18 billion. Stanford's only place with a lot of money. So some of them don't give loans at all. And if you're that quality student, look at some of them. Sure, try to get into a place that doesn't give you a loan at all. But most of us, we still give that loan because we don't have the endowment yet to say you can't have a loan. So, but and down south, it's really interesting. And maybe it doesn't apply with the population that you work with here, but there's a lot of families that sort of, their kids are really brilliant, and they may have paid, particularly for independent school, and they think that someone else is going to pay for them to go to college. It's not my obligation to pay for that. So we want merit scholarships, and so many people are just, I guess they don't do their research. They don't know that no merit scholarships at Harvard, or at Stanford, or at BC, or any Ivy, or at Williams. That's it, because the way this country used to work is that you never saw any student of color, until maybe after the 1950s, or almost no students of color at any of those schools, because they were giving merit scholarships. And, I like to say to students all the time, who gets most of the merit scholarships in America? Rich white kids. The people who least need them. So, it's about that. I know we got that. And you needed to be a little bit above the midpoint of the MCAT, and I'm still familiarizing myself with that. They changed the scoring on that test about 2 years ago. But I know you have to be above the midpoint. And so the acceptance rate overall is about 35%. At BC, it's about 58 to 60%. That includes people who have C averages in sciences, who we know aren't going to get in. They try to steer them to a post-baccalaureate year. There are schools that you will do a whole year of science to shore up your science GPA, and then you apply again. Actually, a third of all the people that BC processes for medical school applications are alumni. As long as someone graduates BC, they have the same resources that current students do for using all of the career center resources and that sort of thing. But a student who has, I think last year, a 3.4 science GPA, which is kind of in the B plus A minus range, who is just below the midpoint, had about an 85 to an 88% acceptance rate into an American medical school. So what they've always thought is, it says that there's a recognition. I don't know if anyone else is interested in science, and maybe some of you know somebody, but you can be lower than the national average in your test score and your science and still get into a really good medical school. So it seems to, they're recognizing there's really good preparation for you. But you gotta be good at calculus too. Sean, probably won't be going to medical school, right?
That's why I'm having school.
You don't want to straddle that line.
That's right.
You don't want to go in thinking I can do mediocre trying to get to medical school.
Well, you're still talking about a 3.4, 3.5 GPA.
But the people that you're competing with, that's mediocre.
Oftentimes. But you can go on the website and they do a little XY bar graph about, it's almost like Naviance. Homewood has Naviance, I think, doesn't it? Naviance is a program that shows this is the SAT range, this is the GPA, and everyone applied to this particular school, so you can know about where you are. Medical school, you do the same thing for medical schools, and you see people who aren't much outliers, and they're getting into, Georgetown Medical School, Tufts, NYU, upstate, all the places. It's cheaper to go back to home, wherever home is, to go to medical school. So that's what they do. Other questions?
I wanted to ask you, Howard, to clarify between early action and regular decision, because all of our students will never apply early decision, but we always apply early action.
Okay.
And so our thinking was we do that because they're at the top of the list, their application's there, they're more likely to get in. For institutional funds, they're already in place. And so why would you encourage a student, unless they've done poorly their junior year, to apply regular decision?
Well, and BC is unique, so I'll answer that from our perspective. Boston College is more selective early action, even though early action is non-binding. We're more selective early than regular. We're more conservative with the offers that we go out with. It has nothing to do with the financial assistance at all. It's just that when I think in the 50s, they started this whole EA thing. I think UPenn started it. And we kept with the tradition of pledged not to disadvantage the majority of the candidates who apply regular admission. We don't want too many offers out there early and then find out, from the same high school, there are so many more stronger students, and if we've admitted someone lower in the class, what message does that send to a particular school? Not that you're always locked into a grade point average, because there's other factors, but relative to us, we don't want someone to get the wrong message of that. And we also are not a demonstrating interest school. Have you guys heard of that at all? So a lot of colleges want you to apply early, and it's a little bit of a thumb on the scale that says, I really want to go to that school, so you're going to give me a bit of an advantage because I'm saying I'm going to make a commitment. Well, since at BC, you still have until May 1st to decide. We don't know. We know that historically between 30 and 35 or 40% of the students ultimately might enroll at Boston College, but they're not obligated to. So you don't get that advantage. And if someone really needs a strong senior year, we're not looking at your interest. We're not going to presume that all last year, not quite 9,000 people applied early. We just expect that we should be one of your top schools, but we also reject students who apply early. Many colleges, more selective than Boston College, won't do that. Just by dint of showing interest, they're going to say, if we don't admit you, we'll roll you over to the regular pool. We'll defer you. That, in our minds, we think it's more ethical to tell a student, if you're not competitive, and there's nothing that you're going to do in 6 more weeks of high school that's going to make you competitive, we don't think it's right to let you think you are. And we did, before we started, it sounds harsh, to reject someone just before Christmas. But counselors, we did focus groups of counselors, and they just said, yes, if this person, if you know you're going to reject them later on, if they're not competitive, then do it now because it allows us as the counseling community to get them refocused on schools that are more appropriate. So in a given year, last year we may have denied outright about 20% of the students who applied early. We admitted about 28% actually no, it was 25% of the students, and the rest were deferred. So it's individual. So every school you look at, their policies are going to be really nuanced according to what they want.
So that's really tricky for us, because each of our kids, they apply to 10 schools.
Yep.
So I'm always supposed to know.
And it might be 10 different schools. So you could be talking about 50 different schools right now, right?
But you mean early decision, so you're not binding?
We're not binding.
We do early action.
We only do early action. We don't have a binding ED.
Okay. And do you give the financial aid at the time of acceptance? Let's say you would accept early action. Do you give the financial aid packet then?
Not at that time, because a small percentage of people have the financial aid stuff.
And plus, you don't have to decide till May anyway.
That's right. But if a student has, those of you familiar with the FAFSA, they changed now, so you can actually start applying October 1st. It used to be January 1, and it may make it easier for lots of colleges to give you your financial aid. But we require that. The other thing that you need to know about this change for your tax returns, they now use something called prior. So you don't use your last tax return. So for those of you who are seniors, the college is they used to require what would have been your 2016 taxes. Everything, the reading is going to be done in 2015, 2 years ago. Because again, they think more families are going to have that available, so we can give you something. And so if you apply early, if we have the CSS profile filled in, and anyone can do that now online and submit it. And if we have the 2015 tax return, if someone's admitted, we will be able to let them know, if not right in December, usually by the beginning of January, what their financial aid is. And that's an estimate, because later on, colleges are it's called a revalidation process, where now, when your taxes are ready, the new ones have to come in, and we have to get the FAFSA, because they look at those things against each other. And so sometimes you can expect financial aid to go up and down, according to how accurate the information is that your family provides. Yes.
Would you recommend I'm stealing my GPA isn't quite where I need it to be, to wait until I get my GPA to where I need to be, or will most colleges look back at it, or can you, I guess, resubmit your GPA once you've gotten it up to the point where you'd like it,
Yeah. Depending upon, if you apply to schools that are highly selective, unless they say you gain a distinct big advantage by applying early, because we know that if we had you, you're gonna come. I don't think I would apply early. So you might be the real life example of, it sounds like you might need a really good senior year
Right.
to make your best case for some of the colleges.
That's definitely my case.
Okay, so I don't think, unless you get the different message, if someone interviews you at a school that has an interview, and they say, oh yeah, you're on this trajectory that we like, so you should apply early because you enhance your chances, I would do that.
Okay.
But in a place like BC, I wouldn't, because you have, I don't know if you've had one really good year or one really good semester, but I love sometimes talking to 9th and 10th grade classes, because I get to say, 9th grade counts.
Yeah.
10th grade counts.
Can you say that louder for my kids at home?
9th and 10th grade count.
Yeah.
But he is the student you were talking about that's
Yeah.
on this kind of trajectory, so it might be really beneficial for him to continue showing that.
Yeah, it sounds like you should not apply till January 1st or 15 or
Well,
whatever.
That's my
And
advice.
Sean, you gave that advice for Sean
Yeah.
specifically. So.
Any questions any other for me or for JW? He likes to talk almost as much as I do.
JW, I worked in one Birmingham City School to help kids fill out their FAFSA, and one thing that we found with our own foundation in Birmingham, we have a limited amount of students, we have to have parental support. It's important for them to cooperate, and so, because you know the mass amount of paperwork that goes into getting a kid into school.
Sure.
So what do you do about the kids, because what I encountered was the parent didn't know where their tax return was, or they didn't have a tax return.
Yeah, so as Howard mentioned, this has been this is a major issue, but two things now are in play that make it a little easier. The first is that it's no longer kicking off in mid-January, it's kicking off in October.
Mm-hmm.
And the enemy of FAFSA completion is simply time. You really want it to be done probably by early March in order to make sure you're meeting scholarship deadlines. And then the second thing was, a lot of times, like for example, I don't fill out my taxes until March or April, because I have no compelling reason. And a lot of our families, while they love their kids, they're not necessarily college grads, and they don't know the urgency around it. But now, because you're able to use the prior year tax returns as opposed to having to do the immediate one, it's going to become a lot easier. So my major piece of advice, at least what it's worked for us, there's a group called Alabama Hospital, which does this.
That's what I was working.
They do pretty well. I think where we've helped them in Birmingham City Schools is we just know the kids. And the enemy was always time, and so we would start early on in August or even prior year at the end of their junior year, and it was digging in. And the things we do well, like you're out of the box thinking, well, we don't do that. We do inside the box execution. That's what we're really good at. So I got a spreadsheet with every name, and we know who the person is, and it's just, at first, you're gonna do 3 or 4 waves of just macro information out there, and that's gonna get you 50% of the way, and then it's just micro-targeting. You just gotta go to each kid, and you're gonna find the person who can be the lever for that kid, but the enemy there is time, so you need to be starting right now with your seniors.
Does it matter if they fill in a paper application in terms of loading? Because now you can get all the information loaded. If you did an electronic tax return, for sure, most of the information transfers, so it makes the fast part easier.
I would say that for last year, and I am not the right person to answer it, so I'll answer it, is last year, anyone who had filed within 6 weeks, no matter how they filed, you were able to transfer that pretty easily, no matter how they did it. This year, because it's a prior year, and we're all new on this, but because it's a prior year, it should be going like that. So it should be relatively, and the thing is, you can submit your FAFSA and then fill in the tax form, tax stuff later. It's not ideal, but you could do it. But the key is like getting it completed. One of the real holdups last year was, and this was a new wrinkle, it's always something new to keep people employed. The PIN number was really challenging. Because in previous years it was really easy, and then this year, like, you get the family PIN, and that really threw everything haywire. I think there were 2 different numbers. And so you really want to get that PIN number nailed down. The tax returns are no longer the barrier. Time is always a barrier, but less a barrier. Get that PIN number. Get that PIN number. And just have to get, listen, and you
Know your parents' PIN number.
yeah, this is
I know this.
This is relatively simple. It's as simple as an Excel chart. it's 5 columns on an Excel chart and 10 really organized people who can leverage a broader network to get this stuff to happen.
And Howard, I have one other thing I wanted to, ask you. What we found in our limited amount of time in our foundation is that our kids don't get any money from the South. We have to send them away. That's why they're at WashU and they're at Boston, and, we've just learned that. And so we're wasting our time applying to Rhodes, Vanderbilt.
Swanee, Furman.
Those schools we
Center's the
love.
only one that we've had any luck with, and that's going about 5.5, 6 hours
Yeah,
away.
Center is the closest school to us that has the kind of institutional funds to support our students.
Surprised me about Vandy, although they have a fair amount, but I lost a really, really good student.
That are willing to do it too.
Yeah, but they actually lost it to merit scholarship.
Yeah.
See, a young gal who was brilliant who wanted to come to BC, but came from a family of doctors and big family, but her need wasn't great. And then Vandy wanted her and gave her something like
Yeah.
$30,000.
So that's a hurdle for us
Yeah,
because
so that
it's
means,
hard,
yeah.
to send your child 8 to 12 hours away in a part of the country that you've never even been to. So that's another big thing that we have to work with, but that's one of our mission criteria is they have to be willing to go out of the box.
Right, interesting. Well, it's great that you do that at the beginning part of it, as opposed to.
Well, we've learned, and that's the other thing, we now ask for tax returns at the beginning. We ask for
So you know.
as many things up front on the application that the kids are like, why do you need my parents' tax return from, 2015? But it's so that we can be strategic. I mean, we have to be strategic. We can't be, like you said, there may be 50 schools we're gonna now be calling to find out, do we do early action or do we do regular decision? So, but this is very.
Man, this is kind of a big choice.
But
JW, where's your people helping us now?
What'd you say?
We need your people on our foundation now.
Yeah, when I finish with Birmingham, I'll come.
Thank you all for